laugh and they question that.
I'm listening.
They tell me after 5 times of that
Come in.
how much of it's joking.
Yeah, okay, that's it.
My favorite tool just failed me. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Georgie Dino will start handing out some.
Gee, I thought you were going to tell me I was going to say a prayer or something.
Start handing out some paperwork. It's not a test, so you can all relax. And you can make notes on it if you want. It's basically what I'm going to be talking about. But first of all, good morning to everyone. I can't even tell you the response to trying this marker training has just been overwhelming. There are 26 or 7 of you here this morning. There were 14 in San Diego, and we've got 9 or 10 signed up for Sun City. And always a couple of stragglers come in. So I think it's amazing that there are 50 people. And most of you are accomplished bowlers, and most of you have marked. So the fact that you even wanted to attend something like this, I think speaks well to the quality of bowling in the Southwest Division. And the interest of our bowlers in doing the best job we can for the division and for bowls in general. So, without any further ado, in San Diego, I introduced everybody to everybody, but I'm not doing that here. We were a much smaller room. I think all of you know each other. If you don't, if you see someone here you don't know, introduce yourself later. Okay, so the marker program is an attempt to standardize what we're all doing as markers. And I think that that will be good for all of us and lead to less confusion and sort of a cohesive feel about how you go about doing this thing. How many of you in here do not know what a marker is? Okay. Fantastic. I was surprised when people signed up for this that some would say, I would love to attend this, what's a marker? And because we all it just seems so commonplace to most of us. But not everybody knows, and there are some misconceptions about what markers are supposed to do, what they can and can't do. And there are also a lot of misconceptions out there about what players may do towards markers and how they may act. So it's going to be a little bit of a reverse education at the same time. Okay, so on your sheets that you have, let's just get started. Oh, one more thing. We do plan to spread this throughout the United States. The documents that you have, I do want to say, is not my creation. A lot of it's just straight out of the laws of the sport of bowls. Markers' duties are in there. But this particular document was actually written by Cindy Higgins in the Southeast Division. And I was so impressed with the Southeast Division markers when I went there for the Open in 2016, that I asked her to send me her materials. They're very active. All of their markers have bright yellow shirts that they wear. And they're really involved in it. And she conducts these training classes. And so I asked her to send me her documents so I could try to emulate her, because she deserves the credit for this piece of paper. So that's where I started, and the shirts, which you will see later, will have Bowls USA on one sleeve and your division on the other. And I plan to offer this probably at the Southwest Open on the Friday before the Open for those players that are coming down from like the Northwest Division and PIMD, and see if we can't, probably Evie Parkell up from the Northwest, or PIMD, she's the head division umpire up there, can spread it around. Yes?
I see one glaring error already. Number 2, spray chalk will be provided. Doesn't happen.
Okay.
Wrong. On that happy note.
As I said, this comes from Cindy Williams, Cindy Higgins.
They're more generous.
Much more generous.
Okay, so let's just get on into it. I just like to do this inside, and then we'll go outside and we'll just do a little bit of a demo. And you don't really need much, I know. Okay, so my sheet says, I don't think yours does, my sheet says arrive wearing appropriate white attire, which I changed in that one, and I think it just says appropriate attire.
Right.
And that would include the proper bowling shoes. Okay. Spray chalk will be provided. Well, according to some, it won't.
Exactly.
But I do like the next sentence, which is correct, that you will mark on opposite sides of the bowl along the running surface. 2 marks. That's for those of you who have never marked before. When a bowl goes in the ditch, it can fall onto the chalk marked side. And then everybody goes to measure later, and nobody knows, is that the toucher? Oh, I don't know, let me look. Oops, sorry about that measure. So that's why you do that, so you can always see it. Introductions. So one of the items that will come out of this training will be a kind of like a cheat sheet for markers with things that you could say to the players before you get started, and to remind you of a couple things at the beginning. And it will also give you some language to use to players when we get to the issue of number 5. So it says, learn the logos of the players' bowls when you make introductions. But it's also important to introduce yourself so that they don't have to yell, hey, you, and that they treat you well by calling you by name.
Excuse me, marker.
Yeah, right, exactly. So introducing yourself, finding out what their logos are, carry a scorecard if you want. On it you could mark what the logos are, even though you're not keeping score. That would be one way you could do it. Center the jack. Here's my feeling about how I would like to see our markers handle the delivery of the jack. I would like to see all markers stand on the bank when the jack is delivered. I don't know about you, but I always roll wherever the marker's standing. It's just, you know, we all do that. So, or maybe not all of us. So go ahead and stand on the bank. Once you've, good morning. That's okay, come on in. Once the jack is delivered, however, your position and your place is on the rink of play. That's where it belongs. That's where you belong. There is no way to perform the functions of a marker if you are not on the rink of play. And if you run into bowlers who say that they don't want you on the rink of play while they're bowling, your response is, I cannot do my job without being on the rink of play. I will try to stay out of your line of sight when you deliver. Period. Just something, nothing mean, but just I can't do my job unless I'm on the rink of play. And since all markers are going to stay on the rink of play, we'll all be doing the same thing. The players, the bowlers will become accustomed to the new procedures if we all follow them the same. Let's see, center the jack. Go ahead.
Okay. Are there 2 markers per rink, one on each side, or do we have to walk back and forth?
Well, it's a good question. You can do it with 2 markers. You know, if you feel the need, and if there's one available. Otherwise, yeah, you would be expected to go back and forth. Go ahead, Fred.
I think what she's referring to is that sometimes there's a limited number of markers, and we may have to cover 3 lanes rather than walk back and forth. Yeah, is that what she meant?
No.
No, but that's a good one. But that's another
That's
one.
right, Fred. Now she's wondering what she signed up for, Fred.
You know, there are always going to be extenuating circumstances.
Right.
You know, I can't I can't cover all those in this. What I'd like to get to is what you're going to do under normal marking conditions. And if we end up with not enough markers and someone has to run around, of course we're going to make adjustments. That's all you can do.
Are you looking at me?
Yes.
Now everybody's looking at you.
You look at me?
When the jack is set, is it appropriate or inappropriate to expedite things in the future to put a little chalk mark down?
That's
So you
okay.
can, it's all right?
Yeah, that's good. One dot, by the way, folks, for chalk marks on the green. Just one. We don't need 3 or the whole thing around. Just one. Okay, so now we come to 5.
Yes. I have a question there, yeah.
Okay. Markers are required to question a jack that may be too short. So, the laws of the sport of bowls say that markers must, that's mandatory, ensure that a jack is of a legal length.
Really?
That's what the laws of the sport of bowls say. Here's, on my little note, on my cheat sheet with the red ink, you didn't get the red. It says, if both are okay with it, do not question it further. So, that's what she says. I think differently. But it's one of the things that we discussed in San Diego, and it is actually something that I want to discuss with the markers here. Because until I do the 3rd marker session, I'm not going to make up my mind how we're going to handle it. So, the jack gets delivered. It's obviously short. I mean, even the players are probably already waiting for it. You walk up as the marker, you grab it, and you just toss it back. Now they've pulled the mat out. You don't know how far. They roll the jack. They don't say anything. You're kind of looking at it. What do you do? I think that it might be too short. We don't care. We're going to play it anyway. So now what do you do? Anybody have any thoughts on that? That's me. That would be absolutely me. But I've been called a few things for pulling out my rule book.
Why do you have a rule if you're not going to enforce it?
I agree with you.
Or I would ask the skips, do you agree? Because there seems to be some.
No, there's a single.
They are the skips. Yeah.
See, I was always under the impression that the person who rolls it, and if the other person doesn't complain about the distance, let it be. Obviously, nobody's saying it. If I roll it short and my opponent doesn't say anything, I want to play it. Even in any game, pairs, triples, singles, the opponent skip doesn't say anything. My opinion is we play it. And why would the because marker interfere?
Because it could be an advantage for the person rolling it compared to the rest of the tournament.
Well, then his opponent needs to point that
Still
out.
an advantage.
Your face says it all now.
Yeah.
Still an advantage.
So but I agree with if there's a rule, you follow the rule.
Yeah.
So under
Or
markers,
you change the rule.
so under markers' duties,
Yeah.
You make the measure.
it says the marker must ensure that it's a legal jack.
Okay. So then also at the beginning of the tournament, it should be announced that that's what's going to happen, so people aren't surprised when it may occur in the second game or for the first time or whatever.
And this was basically the same suggestion that came at the San Diego club, was to tell the players before each game starts, if I think that the jack is too short or question it, we will be calling for a measure so that they know.
Because a rule's a rule.
That's so. Go ahead, Pashi.
Well, after your 3rd session debate with yourself, is that something that we can go out and say, my rules say that if I question Jack is short, how do you feel about it?
No, you don't ask them how they feel about it.
This is how we're gonna behave.
But this is, remember I said I'm going to give you all a little cheat sheet? And on there, after the next session, will be the language to use so as not to inflame, and so that you have something to stand behind when it comes time to say, I think you need a measure, and the next words maybe out of your mouth will be, umpire.
Right.
Go ahead.
So what are you supposed to do? Ask them how far up they place the mat and then look at the jack? And then you better darn sure be right or you delay the whole game? I mean, I think as a marker...
Well, I think that I think that as a marker, if you question the jack length and say, I don't know, this looks like it might be short to me, right. You know, because you aren't going to know, then most players, well, like we do in any game, one of them walks out from wherever that's been placed and says, well, we need about 8 feet. And then you stand there and you look at it and you go, we're good. Or it could still be a question. The same way we do it in our games.
So basically you are asking them
Yeah.
to measure. Okay.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Carol.
So another way, Shelley, if I'm hearing you correctly, to say that would be, given the various levels of ability of markers, you know, that some of us are going to be new markers, some of us have a little more experience, some of us have a lot of experience, is the marker is delaying the game. And we're instructing them to do so. So that's just another way to look at it, is we're instructing the markers to insert themselves into the game using their own judgment as to whether it's too short or not, and it will delay the game and there will be a measure. So as long as, you know, if it's open to debate, that's another viewpoint.
Okay. All right. Great. I will delay in the game.
A marker should be independent of the actual game. He's just kind of a referee that stands there, or just a person to move the jack and chop the jack. But once he starts making a decision, like it's too short or it's not too short, we should measure it, we should talk about whether it's short or isn't. I agree, he's delaying the game and interfering with the play. I don't like that rule.
Do you think that it's...
I don't like that rule, but we have to, if it's in the rule book, we have to follow it.
Do you think it's a delay of game when your opponent says, I don't think that the jack's long enough, I want to measure it?
No, that's your opponent.
No, he's a participant in the game. The marker is not a participant.
Is there a limit to how many times someone can do that to you during a game? I've seen people question it 5 times and measure it 5 times, and just because they
have the right.
They have the right. Jan?
I don't get to use my tape.
Don't you think this has something to do with the level that we're going to be marking?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're marking in the Southwest Division Open, all right, you can maybe question, depends on who's playing. You need to be aware of who's playing. If you have a game that's for the national championship and you're marking for the finals, and the 2 best men are playing, and they say, close enough, really, you want to insert yourself there?
No way!
Get there, put on your bulletproof vest and go out there.
Adri?
So I totally disagree with the last comment for this reason. The reason for the marker program is to set a standard and to start treating the sport as a sport. Because part of the reason with the game right now is that we have multiple levels of how players are treated and how the rules are treated. When in effect, the sport should be treated as one across the board, no matter where and no matter when. And this is what adds to the confusion of the play. And by setting the standard and by playing by the rules as they are stated, you are elevating not only the game, the play, and the players themselves. And this is what I believe is fantastic about this marker program, because we are in fact raising the bar, setting the standard, and making everything equal at all levels as it should be.
Correct.
Good point.
Are we all gonna vote on umpires and markers?
No.
I'll insert myself.
Bowls USA and Bowls in the USA are not ready for that yet. We're not, there aren't enough bowlers, there aren't enough. This is a good start though. And if it becomes an Olympic sport and it's played here, and it's played here in Los Angeles like we hope it will be, those markers doing those singles games are going to be
on TV.
Huh?
On TV. Well, at least on YouTube.
At least on YouTube. And they will be making sure that those jacks are of appropriate length.
Damn right.
You know, you're an official on the field, just like an official at some other place. When you're wearing the shirt and you're designated play, you're an official on the field. And so, go tell on her and on Jim over there about following the rules. Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
You're official on the field.
Go ahead.
I thought anything past the hog line, because the single player should know where to place the mat to begin with, and they have to roll it past the hog line.
Depends on where they put the mat.
Well, they can move the mat anywhere.
Yeah, I know. If they move it clear up, they have to have it 6 feet from the bank, right? If it's way up on the hog line.
You can put it 10 feet from the bank or 15 feet from the bank if you wish. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
And then the hog line's immaterial.
Ginger?
Yeah, you can do that.
So if we can't, we're not ready to do this like across the board and everything. Within a tournament, can the markers agree before play how they're going to handle it on every rink across the board? So I don't get into a game where it was okay to throw it short because I agree with the other player, and in the next game, oh, there's a rule and you got to roll it again.
That's what the cheat sheet's going to do for you.
Can we just,
And we are.
And that's enough.
We are.
I agree with Adriana, and we want to at least agree within that tournament.
That's correct.
With the umpire, I'm assuming there's a hierarchy and there's someone we answer to as an umpire to make the determination. And we all agree beforehand.
Right, and I think that once we get to the Southwest Division Open, it will be a great opportunity to announce to the men and the women who are bowling in that event before singles how we view it and what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, then no one can complain.
And then no one can complain.
Well, they can, but
it's not scary anyway.
You can be good.
They can and they will.
We all agree.
some people
Hopefully you just have to show a hand. What the crowd thinking?
Well, we could do that, but I will just say that in my position as National Umpire-in-Chief, I'm not going to approve anything that completely negates the laws of the sport of bowls. I can't do that.
Okay.
So
You're kind of going to require it then.
I think I am.
It says.
How can you kind of
If it's in the rule book, you gotta follow it.
Yeah.
In the
Go
rule
ahead,
book,
Brett.
you gotta follow it.
Maybe then part of the training is that we put jacks out there and get used to seeing what 21 meters looks like from the front of the jack and from the jack to the mat. And just look at it and say, okay, now I know, judge-wise, what it looks like, and we can tell right away if it's too short.
And I think that, I do think it would, I mean, really, most of us say, is that long enough, when we're in a game, you know, is that long enough? And the people down there say, well, you need 8 feet, and you go walk it out. I mean, most of this stuff is handled that fast. Very seldom are we really doing measures with the long tape. So I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue, but you know, there's no one down there for the singles players unless they ask the marker.
Right.
Otherwise, they're asking their teammates.
But as an umpire, you get called on long tape
Yeah.
measure more than any other call.
Mel, on that, because some of us also have the 20-meter tapes, that takes time. Can't we just have like like you do the poles to mark the 2-meter line? Can't we just have a piece of rope that we go thump, thump, there it is? We don't have to undo it.
Yeah.
Huh?
First down.
Yes, Avery.
I think that's a great idea, and one of the things that the marker program people have been discussing that there will in fact be what we've sort of been calling a marker coordinator that will be at some of the bigger events, and it will definitely be at the Southwest Open. And that marker coordinator will, in our minds, have the spray chalk for the markers. I love this idea about this single piece
Even
of
those of us
string
who have it, it
that
takes
the
a long
marker
time.
coordinator will have for this, and then the markers will be issued this equipment for that event, and then collect it, and then have it. And so this is part of the bigger idea of the program, and this is something that could be included in that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, we'll look at that, because I see what you're saying.
Delay of game. I know we're talking about delay of game, but when I watch an NFL game, they delay for instant replay review. It adds half an hour at least. We're not delaying it that much. We're just trying to make sure the sport is equitable and following standards. It's not going to add, much.
It doesn't.
I've seen times where people will try to like interfere with the other player by calling for measurements again and again and again to disrupt their play. If you're marking and you think that it's long enough and someone's calling for the measure, can you call them off and say no?
Ooh, that's a great question in reverse.
I don't think that's a good
Just
idea.
the umpire can do.
I wouldn't.
You're an official.
If you think it's like 70 feet long and they're doing it for the third time in a game, and you realize it's just part of the strategy to disrupt the other
But
player.
that should be the opponent should bring that to the head umpire's
To the umpire?
attention so that they
Okay,
can
so
watch
just
it.
as a marker,
I
you
wouldn't-
can't.
I
As a
wouldn't
marker,
take that.
you can't tell them no, that's long enough. Keep playing. You can't.
Yeah, you're not supposed to annoy, distract, or whatever. But then that's in possession of the rink. Doesn't really talk about what to do when the person starts off being a jerk. So
They call that gamemanship sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah, they call it
yeah,
really annoying
Yeah.
too.
yeah. So, but I think I have to agree with Phil on this one. I think that that's something that you as the player have to take in hand and go to the tournament director or the head umpire and say, I think that this is intentional. And then what you could do is, then the umpire can say, okay, I'll come sit, and when the jack gets delivered, if I don't think if it's long enough, I'm going to tell him it's long enough, and you guys move on. I mean, the head umpire
So
can
you
do
defer
that.
to the umpire.
Yeah, not the marker.
Well, the marker wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would.
Right, all right.
Yeah, the
But
opponent.
In any game, you should.
If the player requests the marker to get involved, in other words, this is the third time, that the jack has been challenged, and the player who's suffering says to the marker, well, do you think it's too short? Do we just say, it's not my call?
No, it is your call. We just read the rules, it is your call.
No, it's just extremely.
No, they're being asked. They're being asked if it's too short. They're not questioning.
Measure.
Measure, yeah.
Yeah, measure.
They can always, you can ask
marker does
you
not
can ask the marker anything. You may not always get an answer to everything, like, what's going to happen if I hit the jack. You may not get an answer to that.
What should the marker say?
But the marker could say, well, how far from the 2 meter mark are you? And then they can say, no, it's plenty, it's fine.
In my opinion,
In my opinion,
because they can ask you how far, who's holding.
That's right, how far a bowl is.
yeah. Well, I find it interesting. This number 5 has created the greatest amount of discussion in San Diego, certainly here.
Yeah.
Because it's a big one, because I think for the most part this is why I said there's going to be some re-education of our bowlers. Not just marker training, but our bowlers are going to have to kick it up a notch on how they view their role on the green. So, 6, I think we all know about where to spot the jack 2 meters from the ditch if it rolls in, but if it doesn't go in the ditch. Immediately mark touchers.
Okay, people do have questions about where the jack is set when you put it on the 2 meter mark, and just to be.
We are going to do that in the demo outside, okay, so that all of you are clear on how much of the jack is or is not within 2 meters of the ditch and all that kind of stuff. But we'll just do that outside. I think that one's easier to demo out there than in here. For immediately marking touchers, moving on here. The laws say that to mark touchers immediately, and that the player on the next to bowl is to allow you time to do that. Well, we all know some players, like how many of you know Tony Bear and how fast he gets on and delivers a bowl? I mean, the man, I don't know how he does it because his weight's always just spot on. He just picks up his bowl and bowls. So the laws also say that if impossible to get it marked before the bowl is delivered, as long as it gets marked before the next bowl comes to rest. That's a little more important for us when we're playing a game and there's a team out there. But as far as markers, mark it when it's convenient and just get it done before the bowl has come to rest.
Good.
So you're out of the head again.
Next bowl.
Yeah. So I think we all can do that. Put dead bowls on the bank. We all know to do that.
Not on the mat?
Dead bowls?
Yeah.
On the bank.
On the bank, on the mat.
On the mat is just a courtesy.
No.
You don't scratch it.
No, but I've been told that you put it on the mat. It takes
That's a
longer
nice
to
person you are.
Well,
It
it's
takes
kind of.
longer to get the mat.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
told not to put it on the mat, but
Yeah,
I always
not to.
do because I don't want to scratch their bowls.
Like you're
Whatever.
comparing with the person taking up the mat.
I think I just wanted to say
Should not put them on the mat.
Because it takes time to take them off the mat.
Yeah, you should take them off, you should not put them on the mat.
You gotta take them off the mat to get the mat.
But you got to take them off the bank, so what's the difference if you take them off the mat or off the bank?
Because the lead usually ends up getting stuck with the job of removing the bowls.
That's right.
And the other person's getting the mat, you're right.
You should not put them on.
I am not. This is not an issue that I am going to spend any more time. We're moving on.
You're welcome.
There is a,
Thank you so much.
there is a point. Dead bowl is out both ways. That's dead, right? No toucher goes out. That's dead. Goes out that way. That's dead, right?
Out of bounds is dead.
He
We're
said
talking
no
about
touchers. He said.
No, I said not touchers.
Just
Dead bowl is
It's
down
dead.
and out, right?
Correct. It goes in the
Okay.
ditch,
Then
or
a line,
out of the
a line
ring.
has to be measured. I mean, a bowl that's on the line has to be looked at before it can be considered a dead, and then both agree that it's dead.
the players are going to the players need to be watching for bowls in the boundary line.
Right.
And I don't believe that the markers are asked to go over and make those checks.
Got it.
That's one part of the job.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Higher
the
pay
players. Huh?
Higher pay grade.
Yeah, higher pay grade. There you go. Okay, mark the sand in the ditch to show the resting positions of a live jack and any live bowls. We all know to do that and why.
No.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a bowl in the ditch or a jack in the ditch, you draw a little circle in the sand around it, because I don't want any markers putting their hands in the ditch or their feet up on the bank because there's a drive coming in or trying to stop a bowl. If it moves the bowl in the ditch, so be it. You'll put it back where the circle was. And that's what you should be doing in games too, in all games.
Let the bowl go in the ditch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had not heard that about the little
I just
circle?
started in January or December.
Oh, good.
Okay, excuses.
I learned that the hard way. I put my hand in the sand.
In front of Charlie's Drive.
In the sand. No, it wasn't a drive. But I put my hand in the sand. The bowl fell onto my hand as opposed to into the sand. And boy, I learned that one. That was like the first time I marked, and it was like,
Yeah, don't ever do that one.
don't ever
again.
do that.
Okay, never block a bowler's vision of a rink marker. Okay, so here you're the marker, and you're going to be standing out on the green, somewhat behind the head, and you need to be there close enough so that when a bowl is coming in, and it comes, here you are, here's the jack, and the bowl comes around behind it. you need to be moving forward so you can see if it touches that jack. And you may not always be able to see that if you're not right up there. One of the reasons for being on the rink of play at all times. Also to be watchful for errant bulls coming in.
Or leaving.
Or, yeah, you know, or a wrong bias or whatever, so that you're available to get to it. I don't want to see my markers jumping off the bank and trying to get to the hog line to do that. I want you all to be able to bowl later in the day. But this says, never block a bowler's vision of a rink marker. So there you are, you're standing out on the rink of play. Don't stand right in the center. I don't, but some bowlers actually use the center line to line up their shots. So one side or the other, I would say just 2 or 3 feet on either side, doesn't have to be much. If you can tell, obviously, and you have time to do it, I wouldn't say jump and do this every time. Most of us, and you see that they're going to bowl on the backhand and you know you're standing on their backhand side, I do think that it's would be completely appropriate then to move over to the forehand side of the center line. But if you're not standing too far over, then you shouldn't be blocking their view down the rink anyway. So a couple meters back, a little bit to either side of the center line.
What's considered the head?
That's a great question. Can I come back to it?
Yeah.
What's the head? It's a more technical question than you think. Okay, 5 to 7, so we've done 12. 12. All caps. Do not move. Okay. How many times are you watching a singles match, or even in your own matches, and you're down there in the head, and that ball comes in, it's going to wick, and you go... You just can't stop yourself, because it's just, you know what it's going to do. Don't do that as a marker. It's you're going to want to. I know, it's almost impossible to avoid, but don't move. In fact, don't give away anything about what you think about the match, whether if you think that somebody needs to go back and have a lesson again, or if you think that someone is just like, oh my God, look how good they bowl. Just try to maintain a very neutral position, and your body language needs to stay neutral too. And doing this is not being neutral. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Do not walk towards the head to look it over. I don't know how some of the rest of you have been impacted, but you're marking a game, and the ball comes in, and you just know they're probably going to want to know how far away it is or whatever, and so you just kind of get prepared to answer their question.
And they don't ask.
Right. And, you know, I know when I play singles, sometimes I know that I'm holding shot, even though my opponent has already declared to me that they have it. But I know that I'm holding shot. I don't want anybody suggesting to my opponent that they might want to ask who's holding shot. And I'm certainly not going to ask who's holding shot if I'm sure I've got it. So if you're a marker and you start this, you know, you're kind of giving away the game plan, or maybe not, but maybe, of what someone, and it's not appreciated by the players. So I've gone down many times to take that point and had my opponent say, oh my God, I thought I had shot the whole time. Really? I didn't. I knew I had shot. So be careful about, that's what that's referring to. Don't walk towards the head to look it over.
As a marker, are you telling them the score?
Well, yeah, we'll get to that.
Oh.
Yeah, we're coming to it. In fact, it's the very next one. When a player asks if they're holding shot, it's often wise to single it's a measure unless it's clearly obvious. So it is a little bit farther on before we get to the score thing. Yeah, so we kind of wanted to have the same hand signals as markers, but I'm happy with a couple of them. Some people have been doing this lately for a measure. I like doing this because I think it looks so cute. So
Yeah, that's
very fam. You know, if you guys want to get up there and do this, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it.
So if they ask if they're holding, right, and you would just say no, you don't sit there and actually say, no, it's this one right here. You don't point and say which one it is. You just say yes or no.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
We are going to get to it because it is specific. Okay, in fact, now we finally get to the next one. In general, do not volunteer information, but when a player asks a question, don't make them continue asking related questions. And this is even in the laws of the sport of bowls. It specifically calls it out and says, when a player asks if they're holding shot, you can say, yes, you're holding two. We don't want to go through the, are you holding shot? Yes. Is it one shot? Yes. Is it two shots? Yes. Is it more than two shots? Yes. I mean, you know, for that, it's just, you know, yes, you're holding two shots, if you can see it.
That's simplified.
Yes, yes, as far as that goes. I did observe a bowler at the National Championships discussing strategy with a marker, discussing strategy with one of the players, which I went and corrected. But you don't need to do that. You wouldn't say two, but if you could mark this one in or push this one in, you could have three. Okay, we're not doing that.
It's the Larry method.
Okay, but other questions? Go ahead,
I thought
Shelley.
you were supposed to just answer the exact question that they have asked you and not give any more information.
That is correct,
Just
but
give more information.
if you read the things with regard to the number of shots that the person is holding in the head, that is called out and said. You may tell them that they're holding two.
If it's close and you're not sure one and measure.
Certainly, you can do that.
The words in general, why are they in there? For what we've just discussed right here, right now, because
I think
either you volunteer information or you don't.
Right, and I think that it's probably goes on into the explanation.
Okay.
You're up two is better than you're up.
That's the time. That's the time in general.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm trying to find the markers duties here in the book. Players and their duties. If someone can find the markers duties in
Yeah, get to work, Tim.
Glasses.
Anyone?
Okay.
Anyone?
It says whenever possible, use hand signals. I suppose that's as opposed to yelling up and down the green. So you may show them which bowl is shot with your hand. Remember, pointing, when you have a long jack, pointing at which bowl is shot is absolutely useless information, especially when there are 6 bowls down there. So go ahead and show them where the shot bowl is, and then get back out of the ring. Or, I mean, thank
Markers
you.
duties.
Okay, and then get back out of the head. It says, okay, so this has been, it's not exactly stated that way in here, but World Bowls came out with a clarification on that, which I can find. I've got it, but I know that that is, yeah, so. Do not allow yourself to be distracted from the game you are marking. I mean, let's face it, some games are pretty dull. And lots of times the one going on next to you is the one you really wish you'd gotten to mark. But the two players, it's as their game is as important to them as the game going on next door to them. And so give them their due, respect their abilities, and be a good marker. And remain totally impartial, which comes back to the no movements and you know, no clapping.
Yeah.
Sweet. Wow. Holy, no, can't do that one.
But we should advise the next rink if something heavy's coming.
Yeah, well, the players should be advising too, but yeah. Yeah.
What did you say?
Do not engage the players in conversation. The players are more than, I mean, the players can come talk to you. There's, what are you gonna say? I mean, if they walk up and start talking to you, but don't, just stay out of it. And
that's called the Louis.
So the player comes up to you while they're playing, and they say, "Wow, Denise is really bowling good today. You think I got a chance to ever get a point in this game?"
All right.
Nope. Or better, right?
These are hard because we're all friends, you know. And when I mean, one of the comments back, you might say is, "Well, I don't know, you bolt better, maybe you get one." But
how about those Lakers?
How about those Lakers? That's right. You know, you think the Padres will ever get a home run this year?
Try your best.
How should we be handling
I always
that?
just kind of nod in the affirmative. Whatever they say, I don't say anything. I just kind of, yeah.
I start twitching and they usually leave me alone.
I go into convulsions.
I think that's your fault.
Go ahead, Adri.
So this had come up in San Diego, and I was marking at the national championships here recently, and I was assigned to a rink, and it was a Florida player against a Bay Area player, and I happened to know the Bay Area player, but I actually knew everybody and somebody in every other rink as well, so it wouldn't have been, you couldn't, and we were short markers, so I had to mark somewhere, and so it was just like, well, I'm stuck here. But what made it so uncomfortable was the Bay Area player came up to me and said, "Oh, good, you're marking my game. Oh, I'm so glad to see you." And I mean, that was right off the bat and right in front of the Florida player. And so and this is what's important. Your body language, your facial expressions, everything that you do can or cannot appear to be favoritism. And so, much like Phil said, I couldn't really ignore the person, but I stood there. She came up really animated. "Oh, I'm so glad, it's so good to see you, and you're marking my game." And I just kind of acknowledged and just stood there and as stoic as possible and stared straight ahead at that center line and just had no expression whatsoever. Wow. This kept happening every time, and much like your example when you used Denise, the person that I knew kept coming up and going, "Oh my gosh, you know, did you see that? Or how am I going to do it?" And again, I'm just staring straight ahead and not engaging at all. Now, I have to tell you how that played out. At the end of the game, the Florida player came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you are the best marker," because obviously she knew you, but I felt that you were in charge of this game, and there was no favoritism, and I felt comfortable with you, even though obviously she knew you. And she ran to her bag and picked out a club pin and said, "Thank you so much."
Yeah. There you go.
And so this is the difference that you can make in a game. And this is the level that you elevate the game. And so to have an army of markers who are professional and know what they're doing is really going to really make a difference in this, not only the Southwest Division, but the sport as a whole.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more impressive than, like, Jan and I were in Malaysia with the national team, and they had markers, all Malaysian boys and girls, they're probably mid-teens. They were machines. It was unbelievable to see them work. and you could look at every single rink, and they all worked, they all did exactly the same thing, same gestures, everything. It was super impressive.
That's where I'd like to see
Yeah.
us head.
Yeah.
That would be really
I
great.
think we have the self-discipline to do that.
I don't know. You know, we're Americans, most of us.
Well, we're talking the age group too, yeah.
Yeah, on the age group, right. Okay, good. Let's see. Give your constant attention to the head, the players, and that. Do not engage the players in conversation. They are focused. Inform, let's see, well, we're moving on, going on to 21. 22, inform neighboring rinks of an imminent running shot.
Very important.
Yes, yes. Stop the incoming bowl or any other neutral object. That's the whole thing about being close enough into the head that you can do that. You can't do that if you're up on the bank and they're playing a hogline jack. There's no way.
Mel,
Yes.
if I'm marking here and your bowl has to come into mine this way, am I allowed to pick up my bowl? But are they allowed, is your marker supposed to run over and get it?
A ball that may hit another ball from another rink.
Oh, it's a good question. Let me think about it, okay? Let me do the, because actually, you know, that's an issue, that's not an issue just in singles. You actually, you are not allowed to go into another rink of play. So, you know, bowls coming into your rink of play, you should be picking them up. But oftentimes you see, kind of depends on if it's a short jack and the other team's playing way down at the other, a long jack, and it's kind of whoever can get to it first, you know. So it's a good question. We'll it bowls entering the head.
That made contact.
23, right?
It says stop an incoming bowl or any other neutral object from an adjacent rink. So.
I think what she's asking is if it's.
Oh, no, I would not pick up any bowls on the rink of play. You would stop one from.
So your bowl's gonna hit my bowl, I let your bowl hit our bowl.
No, you stop it.
You stop it.
I stop
You don't pick your own up.
What if it's gonna run a course back into their rink?
That's what she's asking.
I hear you. I hear you.
But if it's in your rink, you're supposed to
You
stop.
stop and he says, that shot is gonna be,
Yeah, that was giving.
and the jack has been offset, now you're playing real close to each other.
Dude, bowl the other hand.
Well, the interesting thing about the question is that it happens not just in a singles match. This is
All
an
the time,
issue
yeah.
for every game played when you have multiple rinks in use. So the laws say that you can't go into a neighboring rink.
Well, not on the club level.
You know, this has to be confined to. This discussion has to be confined to tournament play and things where because social bowls is just a whole other animal completely. And
I still would like a clarification.
Okay. I'm not going to do it right this second. I've got it written down.
Club level, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Do not stop or catch the jack of bowls which are about to enter the ditch. Be prepared to return a displaced live bowl or jack to its previous position if necessary. What is she talking about there?
That's sand.
Oh, that's for the sand. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. Number 26, only the players may ask for an umpire to be brought in. This is a little different than the measure, the long or short jack. But yeah, we're not going to call umpires in because we see them doing something that's against the laws of the sport of bowls, like being out in the rink of play when the other person has possession of the mat or something like that. We're not going to get engaged in that kind of stuff.
Okay, so when there is a measure and they want an umpire, or can the marker measure? No.
They may ask you to measure. And Georgie and I were talking about this on the way up in the car. I think for bowls, at World Bowls and at those matches, all of the markers are umpires and are completely capable of doing all of the measuring. We are not going to have that type of a restriction for our markers. It's just not going to work that way. And if they can't decide and they say, marker, would you measure? If you feel comfortable measuring, go ahead. Or just say, well, you better call for an umpire if you don't want to. If you do not want to do the measure, maybe it's a leaning bowl or it's something weird, and you just no. And in fact, it'll keep you out of that awkward position of perhaps having to call a shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Better to call an umpire.
Yeah. So.
What about if the head is disturbed and you're fairly close by? Can you replace the bowls in the rink?
If you have a disturbed head, I would call for a psychiatrist.
I've done that. and it helped for a while.
You knew that was going to happen. You opened yourself up.
Higher there.
Just like this.
I deserve that.
You got a sign on your back that says kick me. We just put a sign on your back that says kick me.
Yeah, okay.
Jeez.
That would be something that would come out of the bowl and jack displacement charts as to what would be available, and I would think that would be left
For a marker to do that.
Umpire.
No, not a marker. So if a bowl, there's usually not an umpire there, and you see a bowl come in and you know where the bowl actually was and it was displaced, can you go over there and take that bowl and put it back?
No.
Okay.
But that has to be, the players have to do
The
it.
players.
Okay.
I would not
Because
be
the player's not going to be down there and they're not going to know.
But they have to agree. They'll talk about it and they'll agree where they think it should be.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Stay out of it, in other words.
Exactly.
Stay out of it.
You know what we forgot, or I may have missed it. We must center the jack before we call it short,
Correct.
or measure it.
Correct.
Because we had an argument out here once about that. We wanted to measure it before.
Yeah, no, it has to be straight down the center line.
They had a discussion.
Right.
I'm saying that in case.
It has to be centered. The rules say, not only does it say that, but the laws say that it has to be the minimum 21 meters on a straight line from the center of the mat on the center line. So there's only one way to get that jack to that point, and that's to center it before you measure it. There's no option.
Roger will argue that point.
Forget about it.
Forget about it.
I can tell you a time, though, when you measure from the center of the mat on a
Go
diagonal,
learn something.
which just surprised me.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says if, let's say you have a rebounding jack or bowl, and it comes back towards the mat area, and you don't know if it's 14 meters or not. It says that you will measure 14 meters from the center of the mat to the bowl. So in that case, you could be walking at that angle to it.
Yeah.
And it could be, it actually could not, see if I can say this, straight out from it might not be 14 meters, but because you've got that angle going, let's say it's way over by the boundary line, but that's the 14 meters, not straight out. Yeah.
Some of us are new enough. I'm different. What are you talking about, 14 meters?
Short bowl.
The shortest bowl that you can throw.
Like a block, Charlie block.
A Charlie,
A Charlie block.
Call it
Yep.
Charlie block.
There is a
It has to
short,
be
there is
14
a short,
minimum.
a bowl, not a jack.
A bowl.
Oh,
25
the
feet.
bowl.
The
I
short.
guess so, yeah.
If you roll your ball and it's
Okay.
too short, it's not.
Yeah,
No, I thought you were talking about a rebounding when it hits the backboard.
No.
Right.
No.
No,
I
it
thought you were
hit,
talking about
excuse
hitting the
me.
ditch.
Yes, I was. I said a rebounding bowl or
Yeah,
jack. And
rebounding bowl, not a
actually, in
delivered
that case,
bowl.
it isn't 14. It's different length, by the way. So I misspoke.
Oh.
But the measurement is from the mat,
Center of the mat to wherever the bowl
wherever
is.
the bowl is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the 14-meter rule that was
That is for a delivered bowl.
It's got to go at least.
Has to go at least 14 meters, which
If
is
it
about
doesn't,
47
Pick
feet.
it up.
Okay.
Or
If it's short, you
it's
pick it up.
dead.
It's dead.
It's dead.
You don't get to read. Oh.
It's dead.
It's not a mulligan?
No, it's not a mulligan.
All right.
There are two things about lawn bowling. There are no mulligans in lawn bowling, and there's no crying in lawn bowling.
You could have a rebinding jack as well.
Yes, you
Ends
can.
up being short.
Yeah. And it too would be measured at that.
At that angle,
yeah.
exactly.
Can it play it?
Question about bowls moving. If, as a marker, and nobody's going to do this, but just in case, you happen to kick a bowl, so you put it right back, right, obviously. So my suggestion is to everybody, if you feel yourself kicking something, freeze on that foot, because that's what I do, and then I put the ball right back there.
Good. That's a good point.
Can a player request a new marker? Because Louis, you got thrown out, right?
No, Larry Dunn got thrown out.
Larry got thrown out. And the player can request it?
Yeah, right.
Somebody thought it was me, but it was Larry.
Okay.
Like the lady,
Not
from Florida.
only I think could players say something if they feel that the marker is really not doing well. I mean, that's, but I think that markers, prior to the start of the day's games, working with the marker coordinator, can go in and say, I cannot be placed on the rink of play with this bowler.
Right.
All right, I mean, maybe you just had a fist fight the night before with a person.
Yeah,
you know?
or like she says, the lady walks up and gives her a hug, and it's like, hey, wait a minute, get me a new marker.
I mean,
They can just switch with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the players
Yeah.
can.
I think so. But again, when you do these types of things, do them within a friendly way. Have a little levity, or if you can find any. But go ahead, Avery.
Well, I was just going to say that the marker coordinator and the markers themselves should really, for example, if you didn't want to show favoritism in any way, then you wouldn't have a marker from Riverside marking a Riverside player. Now, if there's a Riverside player on every single lane, then it can't be excused. So the marker coordinator would essentially say, you know what? Look, your husband's bowling there, so you cannot mark there, or your niece is bowling there, so you cannot mark there. And really, it should be markers from outside of your regular group. Much like the World Cup, you'll never see a German referee, being the ref in a German game. So they'll pick another country to mark.
But aren't you given a rink before you know who's playing on it?
Sometimes.
You could be. We're small. We don't have a plethora of markers yet. We're gonna, to some degree, and I think most of us, I think all of us, really. I know as an umpire, and I think you will as a marker. Once you take on the position, you want to be impartial. You want to be viewed as being impartial. You want to be viewed as being fair, And so I think there will be very few issues with regard to this. I do not think spouses should mark games for each other. And I don't think coaches should be allowed to mark a game in which they're coaching and marking. That's going to be a no-no. Those little things like that.
Speaking of coaches, if there are coaches, they have to announce that they are going to have a coach before the game starts, right? And they cannot hold on the green as long as they they can coach anything.
And only when their player has possession of the rink. They cannot coach any other time. Yeah. Go ahead, Fred.
I have a question about a ball that's coming in, hits the backboard, comes back into play, and disturbs the head. Not our job to.
It's live. Is it live?
Yeah, it went, a drive shot went in, hit the backboard, came back out.
Right, so we've got a dead ball on the rink of play that's gone through the head and disturbed things.
Yeah, it hit the head, and now it's coming back and disturbing the head.
I don't want to mark that game.
Yeah.
Do we That's a per.
it's gonna be,
Between the
you know,
players.
players are gonna have to put things back, agree.
Yeah.
There
But
may
if it
be,
hits the backboard, it's dead, right?
Yes, it's
yeah,
right.
when it hits
Oh,
backward,
yeah.
it's dead.
The marker should stop that.
If you can.
If you can.
Yeah, if you can.
Not going into the ditch, but you could try to stop it from doing any damage. Yeah, yeah. But it always, you know, it's one of those, another one of those things where you've got some massive drive that rebounds at 25 miles an hour. No, I wouldn't. Yeah. It'll be up to the players.
That's what, I've never seen that happen, but
So I'm
Oh, that would be insane. That would happen.
I'm kind of through the classroom portion of this. I think the discussion's great. I mean, don't we all have good ideas and we're all experiencing the same thing? So